From our studios in the Motor City, this is Autoline. Here now is John McElroy.
Thanks for joining us in the studio. As noted, we're joined by Eric Widmer, the Vice President at Alliance Inspection Management. Great having you here, Eric.
Thanks.
And Michael Wilson with Automotive Recyclers Association. Great having you here, too.
Thank you, John.
Both of you, there's so much to talk about on all these used cars and what's happening in that. But let's talk about flood-damaged cars. You know, we know from a few years ago there were tens of thousands of vehicles that were damaged when Hurricane Katrina hit on the south coast of the country, notably, especially in New Orleans. But also, this past spring, we've seen an enormous amount of flooding up and down the Mississippi and its tributaries. And now my understanding is a lot of cars that should have been totaled because they're being flood damaged are having their titles washed, to use the industry vernacular, and faked and brought in. Tell us a little bit about what you guys see from your side.
Yeah, from our side, Katrina was huge as far as the educational on the flood vehicles and where they were going, and there was numerous news stories of how they ended up in Wisconsin with clean titles. And again, when you have 50 states and some states have more stringent titling requirements than others, there has been a historic problem where one state watches the salvage or flood title off in other states, and so the consumer is out there exposed to not knowing if there's any damage whatsoever. Since Katrina, and what's I think different in this marketplace for the spring and those vehicles that are going through that are flood damaged is the NVIDIA system, the National Motor Vehicle Titling Information System. That system now is up to 49 states. I believe Illinois is the last state they need to bring in. But what's happening is all those vehicles are being put into a national federal database. And so they have been total lost. They may not have the flood damage title on them per se, but they're also supposed to carry those titles over from state to state under this NVIDIA system. But now any consumer can go on to NVIDIA.gov and find out if this vehicle's been a total loss, whether it was in Louisiana or Wisconsin, and so that should give them pause that something's wrong with that vehicle. Okay,
you said National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, but exactly what is that NVIDIA?
NVIDIA came out of the 1992 Anti-Theft Act. It took 17 years before it got to fruition, and it was...
we may get there, but it takes us a long time.
Yeah, it took a while. There was a lawsuit by consumer groups out in California that pushed it over to get it implemented. Also, Cash for Clunkers came along and really pushed it through also because all those vehicles through Cash for Clunkers had to be reported through NVIDIA. But what it has done is it's just making that the insurance companies, current plus 4, if they total out a vehicle, they have to report that. The term junk salvage vehicles or auto recycler vehicles, they are all vehicles of all years have to be reported. So if a salvage yard or an auto recycling facility gets a vehicle in, they have to report that they acquired that vehicle, and they have to do that every month. And when they crush that vehicle, that's also reported into the system, so there's an in and an out. And so for the first time, we're able to view through the VIN number all these vehicles pretty much from the beginning to the end of their lives, which is important. And we sort of talked in preliminary discussions that we don't know how many vehicles are being exported. We don't know how the flow of vehicles work in this country. And so I think this is exciting for us once the system gets up and running, because not all the entities that are supposed to be reporting are reporting. They don't know about it. But once we get the fuller database of information, there's some exciting things out there.
So all these flood-damaged cars would have their VIN entered in the NVIDIA. So theoretically, anybody could check and see, was this car ever flood-damaged?
Yeah, what's great about it is the auctions. If any of those vehicles go through a salvage auction, the salvage auction is considered a salvage junk entity, so they have to report on a monthly basis. And so those vehicles would go in if they were going through an insurance auction. So boom, they're in the NVIDIA system. Any of the other vehicles coming from our folks that we've acquired would also have that designation being put into that system. And what is neat is NVIDIA.gov, there is currently on that site a way that a consumer can go in there, type in the 17-digit VIN number, and it will say there's a entry into this system. They may not know if it's flood, they may not know if it's a salvage.
But if the number's in there, you don't want that car.
You know that there's an issue, and what's good about that is then the consumer can either look to buy the Invitas report, which is from $295 I think to $495, or they could go to an expanded with Carfax or Experian and get a more detailed report. But it does give them that first bit of knowledge to say
it's a warning flag.
Yeah.